The Ghost of Flight 401. On a quiet December night in 1972, a routine flight from New York to Miami ended in one of the worst aviation disasters in U.S. history. But the tragedy of Eastern Airlines Flight 401 didn't stop with the crash. What followed were reports of something far stranger. Sightings of uniformed men who shouldn't have been there. Faces of pilots and crew who had already perished in the Florida Everglades. This is the chilling true ghost story of Flight 401, and you're watching Whispers by Dark. December 29, 1972, Eastern Airlines Flight 401 lifted off from JFK Airport in New York at 9:20 p.m. On board were 163 passengers and 13 crew members. The plane was heading for Miami, just a few hours away. At the controls were Captain Robert Loft, First Officer Albert Stockstill, and Second Officer Donald Repo. All three were experienced, well-trained men. Nothing about the flight suggested disaster. As the aircraft descended toward Miami, the pilots noticed something strange. The green light that should indicate the nose landing gear was locked into place wasn't glowing. Concerned, the crew decided to hold at 2,000 feet above the Everglades while they still investigated. They pulled the landing gear lever. They cycled the lights. They even dispatched Repo into the avionics bay beneath the cockpit to manually check the gear. What none of them realized was that during all this, the autopilot had disengaged. The massive jet was slowly, silently losing altitude. At 11:42 p.m., Eastern Airlines Flight 401 slammed into the black swamp of the Everglades. The left wing sheared off. The fuselage tore apart. Water and fire engulfed the plane. Of the 176 people on board, more than 100 were killed instantly, including Captain Loft and Second Officer Repo. It was a horrifying tragedy, but in the months that followed, whispers began to spread. Because Flight 401's crew hadn't vanished completely. Eastern Airlines salvaged parts from the wreckage, perfectly functional ovens, avionics equipment, even seating sections were installed in other L-1011 jets. And that's when the reports began. Flight attendants noticed strange figures appearing in galleys and cabins. Pilots swore they saw familiar faces in cockpits. On one flight, a stewardess opened a galley oven and screamed. Inside, just for an instant, was the face of Don Repo, staring back at her before fading into nothing. On another, a captain conducting a routine pre-flight check walked into his cockpit, only to find a man in full Eastern Airlines uniform already sitting there. Calmly, the man said, "You don't need to worry about the pre-flight. I've already done it." When the captain looked closer, the man was gone. Witnesses later confirmed it matched the description of Repo. Passengers too reported strange encounters. On one flight, several swore they saw a quiet, stern man sitting silently in first class. Flight attendants checked the manifest. No passenger existed. The description? Captain Loft. The story spread quickly among the airline staff. Some crew members were terrified to work on planes, known to carry parts salvaged from Flight 401. Eastern Airlines tried to dismiss the rumors, calling them nonsense. Officially, they never admitted anything. But behind the scenes, things were different. Multiple reports were documented. Some were even investigated by the FAA. And strangely, the sightings always occurred on planes confirmed to have parts taken from Flight 401's wreckage. Then, just as suddenly as they began, the encounters stopped. Why? Because Eastern quietly removed all salvaged parts from their feet. After that, the apparitions of Captain Loft and Don Repo were never reported again. Even today, the story of Flight 401 continues to haunt aviation history. Survivors of the crash remember the horror of that night. But countless pilots and flight attendants remember something else: the eerie calmness of the apparitions. Unlike many ghost stories filled with malice, the spirits of Captain Loft and Don Repo seemed protective, even helpful, as though they were still carrying out their duty to passengers. To this day, paranormal researchers consider Flight 401 one of the best documented ghost cases of modern times. Because it wasn't just a story whispered in dark corners. It was logged, reported, and witnessed by dozens of trained professionals. And if you ever board a plane late at night, take a look around, because some say the spirits of Flight 401's crew never really left the skies. That was the story of Eastern Airlines Flight 401, one of the most chilling true ghost stories tied to aviation. So, do you think these apparitions were real? Or just the trauma of survivors spreading into the imaginations of flight crews? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out our other true ghost story narrations. You stay safe out there, folks, and we'll see you in the next one.